Thinking of investing, working, or starting a business in the cannabis industry? We've got you covered right here on Plant Problems. Hosted by Tony Frischknecht, Plant Problems takes a different approach to cannabis than what you're seeing and hearing from the mainstream media. Come along with Tony and be in the know about how to invest, work, or start a cannabis business. Let's get the show started with your host, Tony Frischknecht.
Hey everybody, this is Tony Frischknecht with Plant Problems. Hope everybody's doing fantastic today. I know I am excited for this episode. I've got somebody I really am excited about sharing with you. You know, there has been a lot of stuff happening south of the border and north of the border. I'm planning on focusing a little bit more on south of the border right now. We definitely hear little bits and pieces through our media about what's happening in Mexico, but I think there is so much missed. And that's why I have this gentleman on with us today. We actually met, I believe it was back in 2015. There was a fundraiser that I ran across with the governor in Denver and actually the former president of Mexico, Vicente Fox. And this was about a 24-hour event. We had a nice dinner at the governor's mansion. They had actually had about 200 people, so it was very busy. And this was probably one of my first big events where I was throwing on a nice suit and tie, and I'm like, okay, here I am. I'm in the cannabis world. Let's see what these big fundraisers are about. I had done some in the past, but I had never met governors and presidents before, so it was very exciting for me at the time. And I had brought along a few friends of mine that were in the industry as well, because fundraisers aren't cheap. I mean, they're raising this stuff for a reason, and there's a purpose for this. But it's also allows you to, you know, rub elbows with some guys, some movers and shakers, people that are making policy, which is so critical in our industry. You have to know those types of people that can help you navigate through legal channels as well as find new opportunities. So we had a beautiful dinner at the governor's mansion. And then the following day, we actually met at the Four Seasons downtown Denver for a breakfast. And there was my four guys and then 15 other people. And we actually listened to what President Fox had to say about what was going on with the cannabis market in Mexico. And then I was really excited because we were going to get a chance to sit down and meet the president one-on-one. It was a little intimidating at the time. And when we went through the process, I sat down, me and one of my business partners, and to my left was the president, and to my right was his right-hand man. And I have gotten to know this gentleman over the last few years, and he is extremely well connected with Mexico and what is on the forefront. I think on a weekly basis, he knows what's happening. And so I'm extremely excited to have him here with us today. He definitely is on the cutting edge of what's happening in Mexico. And he's got a huge logistics background. He worked for FedEx for several decades. He runs a consulting firm, and he does a number of things. And I want to introduce you to Juan Garcia from Red Eagle Global. Juan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Tony. How are you?
Fantastic. Thanks again for being on. I know you will have some awesome information to share with these guys and the audience today. So, Juan, you've been around the political scene for a long time in Mexico. What was your motivation to get into the big cannabis side as you were seeing it unfold in the U.S.?
Well, Tony, I think I've told you this story before, but it bears repeating. And before I get into that, let me just give you a little preamble for your listeners. What I'm going to share with them today and with you is my opinion as to where Mexico is in the nascent cannabis industry and how I got into it, which is a very interesting story within itself. On December the 27th of 2017, I received a phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning, Central Time, from President Fox. He woke me up. Now, I'm a father of 3 and a grandfather of 12, so I thought something had happened to one of my kids. but it was President Fox. And he says, Juan, I've arrived at a decision. And of course, I was a little bit miffed because at 3:00 in the morning, my goodness, you don't want to wake an old guy up at 3:00 in the morning. That's just uncalled for, man. So my retort was, Mr. President, you couldn't pick a more decent hour to tell me that you made a decision? And his response was, I forgot that I'm in Barcelona right now and I'm 8 hours ahead of you. I said, well, obviously you did forget. So what decision did you arrive at? He says, I have decided to be the voice of reason for the elimination of the prohibition of marijuana and cannabis in the hemisphere, starting with Mexico. I said, congratulations. What does that have to do with me? He says, well, you're going to help me build it. He didn't ask. He said, you will help me build it. And that's how it all started, Tony.
Well, that seems like an early morning call to deal with at the time. That was a lot to handle, I'm sure.
It was a heck of a breakfast meeting.
Well, and I also know you from our discussions in past, you have a deep relationship with the president that goes on for a long time. So I know you've been there by his side for many changes in his life. So being the right-hand man of a president has to be exciting, but also taxing at the same time. Am I correct in saying that?
Kind of, sort of. What I mean by that is it's all volunteerism on my behalf. I made a commitment to him and Mrs. Fox that I would help them harvest money for their foundation, which is a portion through the Charisma Foundation for the children and the elderly in Mexico. And I've kept my word. I've done my best to harvest as much money as I could in support of the foundation. And when President Fox decided to get in to the cannabis industry, we started developing the Canna Mexico Conference, which you've been to a couple of installments of that conference, Tony. And we try to do the best that we could to make it a business-to-business conference like none other. And, unfortunately, COVID-19 got in the way this year, and we couldn't have the conference. But it's on the shelf, and as soon as things settle down, we'll be doing it again.
Hey, everyone. Tony Frischknecht here with Plant Problems. I want to thank you guys for listening in, your why do this show. And I also want to thank you for leaving me a review, taking your precious 15 seconds of your time and spending it with me and sharing me what I do well and what I can improve on. So please go to plantproblem.com and leave those questions, comments, or reviews. All right, back to the show. So you're kind of in the now, what's happening now since you're not promoting and you're not having Canna Mexico, which I will have to say the first year I attended was an incredible event. You guys did a top tier job. So thank you so much for having me and introducing me to the Mexico market. I appreciate that. Where does that leave you now with your adjusting to the new situation?
Well, the new normal, as the media, keeps pounding us with that term.
I know. I didn't want to say that.
The new normal only means that Mexico has to legalize the recreational use of marijuana. They have no choice for economic reasons. COVID not only shut down businesses in the United States, but it also shut down businesses in Mexico. And if you know anything about the Mexican economy, you know that there's a large percentage of the population that is self-employed. You have a lot of restaurants that closed down, a lot of salons, a lot of the same stuff that happened in this country in the United States happened in Mexico. And it exacerbated the economic calamity and recession that the country is finding itself in. So my opinion, once again, is that Mexico has no other choice but to legalize marijuana for recreational use. And from that point on, start taxing it from the foreign entities that are coming in. The issue of sanitary risk. And you were one of the guys that took the initiative and went on to Mexico City after the first Canna Mexico conference and sat in front of the COFEPRIS and tried to get yourself put in line for a license.
Yeah, that's correct. So for the audience out there, the COFEPRIS is the Department of Health in Mexico that he's discussing. So just like it is here in the U.S., they have to go through the proper channels. And of course, that's starting with the Department of Health. Sorry, go ahead, Juan.
So for economic reasons, Mexico has to legalize marijuana at the federal level. I anticipate, and there's a lot of rumors. You know how the rumor mill gets started, Tony. Somebody decides that, well, I know what's going on, and they sent a message out there. And the latest rumor is that Mexico was not going to legalize it till the 1st of December of 2020. Well, it's my opinion that that is nothing more than a rumor. The information that I have is that legalization will happen no later than the 15th of July of this year. I have information that I cannot share without compromising my sources, but I can tell you this. The country has to do it. They have no choice.
So you seem pretty certain.
Oh, I'm either nuts or I'm vindictive, and I'm committed. And I'm committed to making that public. My opinion is that by July the 15th, Mexico will have legalized the recreational consumption of marijuana at the federal level.
That's like around the corner.
That is very true.
So with that knowledge, I mean, there has to be some U.S. companies that are trying to capitalize on that right now. Are you seeing that happening?
I'm seeing a myriad of Canadian and U.S. citizens coming into the country, into Mexico City specifically, and trying to figure out who they need to go talk to at the front doors of the Mexican Senate when they were in session to see who would give them an aperture in the door to get a leg up on getting in. Because remember, the COFEPRIS is no longer handling that function. So I'm seeing a lot of individuals clamoring for attention and trying to figure out how they can get their samples in front of the right people to be able to get a license application in place to start plying their wares in Mexico ahead of the December the 1st supposed initiation date. But I'm telling you, it's going to be much sooner than December the 1st. July the 15th is the date that I got.
Well, this is the first time hearing it, so I appreciate you sharing with us.
I kind of figured that.
Yeah, I know that people that are listening to the show right now, if you do have some interest, I would expect or express you should take a deep dive into what's happening in Mexico if you are working down there. One, that's got to be incredibly difficult to find out the right channels. I mean, of course, we had met with you doing some consulting. Is this something that you're helping people along with, or are you in the chase for yourself?
I am in it to win it.
Okay.
As the old saying goes. I'm trying to help Canadian and U.S. and world corporations with my Red Eagle company to establish themselves in the country. Now, I can't tell you that I have a seat at the table already, but I will tell you that my daily endeavors are in arriving at that seat at the table in the Mexican government to be able to bring my clients into Mexico from whatever origin country they may be from in the cannabis space, to be able to get them licensed and permitted to import into Mexico and to start selling products in Mexico. Also, to be able to cultivate on Mexican soil their particular strains and genetic strains of cannabis. I am so far ahead of where I was 5 years ago, 4 years ago, when I got dragged to the cannabis altar by President Fox, screaming and fighting, because really the last time that I even smoked a joint or had anything to do with marijuana, Tony, was when I was in the military. I think I told you that story.
Yes.
I did one tour of duty overseas, and just to alleviate the stress, we would smoke marijuana. And that was the last time. And that was back in 1971. So that should tell you how old I am.
You know, back then, was it still a lot for you? Because from what it sounds like is it was challenging for you even at the time to do it, but you didn't have another choice. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, and I didn't feel bad that I was doing that to kind of alleviate the stress of being in a war zone. But, that was the last time in 1971. And then run the clock forward to 2018, or 2017 when I got that call from President Fox. And I'm asking myself, now, wait a minute. I've had a 20-year career as a corporate citizen. I am now representing as a senior advisor, 9 former heads of state from Mexico, Central and South American countries. And now I'm going to get back into something that I left behind back in 1971. It was just a like an oxymoron, you know?
Yeah, it's crazy what life does to us.
Never mind what my wife said to me when I told her about it. She says, "Have you lost your mind?" You know? Anyway, we digress. The important thing to note is that Mexico, in my opinion, is going to represent an opportunity for the people that are listening to this broadcast to be able to get into a last estimate $5 billion market in Mexico. Because Mexico is a large country that is very much a homeopathic type of country as far as their healthcare is concerned. People self-medicate in Mexico. People believe in the curative values of the sativa plant, excuse me. And they believe that marijuana has a curative effect on the human unit. So it's a ready-made, receptive market that can be very robust for those entrepreneurs that decide to get into it.
And those entrepreneurs, I try to give them a good idea of what they're up against showing up to Mexico and trying to get their product or get their grow. I mean, what kind of hurdles do they have to go through in order to connect with the right people?
Well, that is the top question of the day. You, as an entrepreneur, and let me just say this, I admired you for your courage because you left the presidential compound from the Canada Mexico conference and flew directly into Mexico City and went and made an appointment with the then COFEPRIS in Mexico City. You don't speak Spanish.
No, I don't.
You took the initiative and you went there based on your desire to get at the front of the line. That is not going to work this time around because the COFEPRIS is no longer in existence. The name of the institution is Instituto Mexicano de Cannabis. The Mexican Institute of Cannabis is what it's being called. It's newly formed by President AMLO and his Senator Olga Sanchez Cordero and Senator Marcelo Ebrard, who are members of the Morena Party, which is the party that President AMLO represents. Those two senators are the ones that created the Institute for Cannabis in Mexico. Those two senators are the ones that are drafting the rules of engagement for foreign entities trying to get into Mexico to ply their wares. Those two senators are the ones that carry the big stick. So who do you think I'm chasing?
Those two senators.
Those two senators. Now, my ability to be able to get in front of those senators based on my bilingualism and my having spent the first 9 years of my formative life growing up in Mexico. Spanish was my first language. I learned English later on in my youth, but Spanish was my first language. I retained most of it, and I've kept up with it. Even in my corporate career, I'm the guy that was credited with bringing FedEx to Mexico. So, in fact, I met Vicente Fox when he was president of Coca-Cola Latin America, and I made a sales call on it because I grew up in San Miguel de Allende, Guanajuato, which is about 3 hours or 2 hours actually by driving by car from the presidential compound where you were at with me at that Canada Mexico conference.
How surprised were you when you walked up and you're like, the president of Coca-Cola Central America? Was that a shock to you?
No, not really, because I had always heard that there was this dynamic personality in business that worked for Coca-Cola that I needed to meet.
Oh, okay.
And so I said, well, I got to meet this guy. Who the heck is he? Everybody speaks so highly of him. And I went and sought him out. And when he found out that I had grown up the first 9 years of my life in San Miguel de Allende, Guanajuato State is where Vicente Fox is from, we hit it off.
Instant connection.
You common ground to build on. And 40 years later, we have a very robust relationship.
That's pretty incredible, Juan. Being just over 40 right now and having a friend for 40 years kind of blows my mind a little bit. He's obviously a close friend of yours at this point. How did that conversation end up as you were talking to the president?
He made a comment. He said, for a gringo, you sure do speak good Spanish. And that's when I told him my story. He says, no wonder. You grew up in the saintly land that I grew up in. And he is very nationalistic in his way of doing things and doing business. He's a Mexican, true blue Mexican. He will die for the flag. He'll die for the citizens of Mexico, which he almost did because he was a guy that broke the 70-plus year rule of the PRI party in Mexico because he was the candidate for the PAN party. Nobody gave him a chance in Hades of ever becoming the top guy in Mexico, but he won. He surprised even himself. Okay?
Yeah, up here in the States, we've seen a lot of him, especially since Trump got elected. And what's amazing about him as a person is he is very much himself in front of the camera, as well as when you meet him face to face.
He's a real individual.
Yeah, I was extremely fortunate for him to accept the offer of writing my foreword for my book. That was incredible. And he simply was doing it for the better good of the industry. There are so few people out there like that. And so I want to thank you for also continuing to bring me along and understand what the president is up to and how he's doing. So I want to thank you for that.
It'd be an appropriate moment, if I may, with your permission, Tony, to say to you that right now, the presidential library and the hotel that's right next door to it that you stayed in, they're in crisis mode right now. Because of this COVID-19, all activities have ceased on the compound. Those revenue streams that were coming through from all the visitors and all the people that were doing special events at the pavilion where we had the Canada Mexico conference, remember that big overhang? All that is dormant right now because of the COVID-19. The foundation depends on those funds for the vitality of what they're doing for the children and the old people of Mexico. So if I had one request of you as a friend of the Fox brand, is that we think of ways to be able to bring some vitality once the travel ban has been lifted to the compound down in Mexico. You've been there. It's a wonderful place.
How do people give to help support his efforts? Because people may not know it, but he has taken what his family has created and donated to the foundation to keep this thing going as he's gone for generations. And so he's given up a majority of his wealth to help and better Mexico. And that's what's amazing about him in that way, is that he is so entrepreneurial. He's always trying to bring people from other countries into the Mexican economy to help build it and help trade across border trade. And so, if there are people out there that are like, how can I help, or what can I do to share? Is there a site that they can go to check out? Is there a person they can contact you if they're listening to this right now and they're saying, you know what, I'd like to look into this a little bit more because I'm interested in trying to help out?
Absolutely. Now, I am not gonna give my cell number because I plan to sleep eventually. But I will give a phone number if you'll allow me.
Absolutely.
To do that now. The phone number I'm going to give is from our offices of Red Eagle in Red Oak, Texas. It's a toll-free number that can be accessed from anywhere in the country. It's 800-214-0639. Or if you want to fax, it's 800-930-7112. I'm in the midst of drafting another white paper on the cannabis situation in Mexico in 2020. And I'll put those contact coordinates in that white paper when I send it to you for public consumption for those listeners on your podcast. I'm also going to put on there my email address for anybody that wants to contact me via email. And if they have an interest in going into Mexico in the cannabis space, I'll be glad to take their case on once I review whatever they send me via email.
Okay. I think if they could reach out to you, to somebody at the 1-800 number as well, if they want to contact you there too, correct?
Correct. It's not open 24/7, but it is during normal business hours. We do have someone that answers the phone there. Now, that number rings in Red Oak, Texas, which is a suburb of Dallas. And my business partner, attorney James Moon, is where I office at his building there in Red Oak.
Perfect. So, there's a lot of information you gave us today. Amazed by the deadline and July 15th. That's incredible. Also, to give the audience a little bit more information, as Juan mentioned, I have gone through this process. I didn't complete it because I had some other things that changed the direction I was heading, but I did start the process. And for those ones that are vigilant out there that want to do it themselves, I'm sure there is a way, but the only way I can think of, just because of my experience there, is if you embed yourself into a place like Mexico City. It's not something that you can really do from afar. The cultures are much different from the US to Mexico. And if any of the Mexicans that are listening out there, they know what I'm talking about. But, this is such a tough thing to navigate. And you're not only navigating an entirely different country, but you're navigating regulations that you're not used to. We have that in the States as well, but not knowing the language very well and not knowing the culture makes it twice as hard. So if you are truly interested in doing something like that or bringing a product to Mexico, I urge you to reach out to a company like Red Eagle Global, because this is what they do. Juan's got logistics training all over Mexico, so he knows dozens and dozens of people down there. But he also can cut to the chase. Saving time as a business owner and entrepreneur, time is money. And if you're the guy on the back end and you're starting a month or 2 or 6 months or a year later, there's guys way out in front of you. And so if you want to get up to the table and sit with the big guys and make your product get to market, this is something that I highly suggest you look into. So, Juan, I want to thank you so much for sharing that information today. And I would love to have people reach out to you. That number again is 1-800-214-0639. As well as reaching out to Juan. You can help fund the Fox Foundation in this tough time right now. Mexico has the poverty rate, and forgive me if this is the incorrect number, Juan, but I believe it still is at 50%, or is it even more now?
It's more than that.
Okay, so poverty is truly happening down there on a completely different level than what you see here at the U.S. These people struggle, no running water, and they can't get water a lot of the time. So keep that in mind when you're looking at, if I want to put my funds to something, President Fox, I have donated to them, and they put it towards helping the people of Mexico. That's their main goal. So, Juan, thanks so much again today. Anyone, if you have any questions, please visit plantproblem.com. And I would love it if you have a couple seconds, 15 seconds, to give me a review and also ask me questions about this podcast. I'd love to get Juan back on again to discuss something more in depth. He's a wealth of knowledge and just a great guy. So, Juan, thank you so much. And I look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thank you, sir. You take care, Tony.
Thank you.
Stay out of trouble.
I will.
I know how hard it is for you.
You've just listened to another insightful episode of Plant Problems. If you like what you heard so far, don't forget to tell your friends and colleagues. For additional resources or to leave a review, head over to plantproblems.com. Join us again next week on Plant Problems with Tony Frischknecht. We look forward to having conversations with you as we go along this journey.